But it didn't come with a PowerPoint, but Martin here has very kindly stepped in and put up an image for me. Just boiled on my weakness or the Hagrahori on the Korea Horse Dusa, chat take and I show you and forget you either in our fad. August Gamal Iskil, but they may be horse as and Gilga, but boil on the focus in our juice, they made horse as Berla. I suppose before beginning, what I'd like to do is acknowledge the dates on it. It's the 5th of May, it's the anniversary of Bobby Sands. I suppose if there's any conference more fitting, it would be this one here, which is about colonialism and decolonializing. Bobby was a victim of the colonizing, victim of the empire. He died as a result of it. But during his life, he fought against it. And not only that, he was very responsible for, I suppose, the revival of the Irish language in the prison and the H blocks, and by extension, then to the outside. Often, I suppose, I hear the term decolonise and think of James Connolly and the Reconquest of Ireland, a fantastic book. And I know this quote about, if you remove the emblems, move the flag, the national anthem, and all the rest of it, doesn't really make any difference, not unless you change the whole society. And yes, if the bailiff affecting you has a green uniform on and a harp and speaks to you in a broad Kerry accent, ask Gaeilge, you're still getting affected. Apologies to any Kerry people here today. But sometimes when you think of thinking about decolonisation, and it's great to hear the contributions earlier here because they did. I suppose one a bit different than what I maybe would have imagined, because I think sometimes it can be seen as something off in the distance. It's something when the reunification of our country, for instance, when you take power and government and all the rest of it, can be very theoretical, and that could be disempowering and all. Whereas I think it's very personal, it's very immediate, it's now, it's about our own lives, it's about the social relations that we have, it's about how we view the world and then how we interact in that world with all the things, not just with other people, as has been mentioned here a number of times, with nature, with ecology, all the rest of it. So it begins now and begins with ourselves. And I think in that sense, I've always seen colonialism as very much like patriarchy, and the fact that two, I think, are interlinked, and fitcha is a great phrase, ask Gaeilge for that there. And I suppose when you think of it, colonialism was driven by men, they were the soldiers, they were the people who became the Lord Lieutenants, so on and so forth. So the two are so closely intertwined. And I want to tell a funny sort of story here. I mean, I like to think of myself as being, sort of gender aware. I did my PhD using feminist methodologies 35 years ago on the blocks, along with Joanna McMinn, who's a feminist friend here from Belfast. We were taking classes with Republican prisoners on masculinity. So you sort of think, yeah, pretty conscious of that. And yet the number of times I've listened to the news, and it's discussed this with my eldest daughter, Quaylen, a couple of years ago. And thankfully she thought the same as me. You hear something about so-and-so was sentenced to be in court to 10 years. The judge said blah, blah, blah. She added that, and she said, oh God, yeah, the judge is a woman. And you could replace judge with consultant, brain surgeon, whatever else. And even when you think you're conscious of these things, it still comes to the shop. And I was delighted I spoke to Quaylen and said, the same happens to me, Daddy. So it shows you how much it's soaked in. So I think colonialism and patriarchy, to me, are just not even two sides of the same coin. They are just the coin, and they actually seep into our pores and into the recesses of our mind and our very soul, and it means then that we have to constantly reflect and challenge that there. And it's sort of as if it's like a common sense knowledge. It just is, that's the way things are. That's just how people be in the world, but we have to, I think it is, starting with ourselves. And I suppose the thing I've always found intriguing, and as someone who was an IRA volunteer, if you look back to the early 70s, and volunteers who were killed and look at their graveyards, you'll see they were like staff captain so-and-so, first lieutenant so-and-so, second lieutenant. The IRA is an organisation which was fighting against the oppressor, the occupation, had structures which replicated the British Army and ranks which did the same. And it wasn't until the sort of mid-70s, the reorganisation, that everybody became a volunteer. Didn't matter what role you played, you could be on the Army Council or the General Headquarters staff or whatever else, but if you died, your grave, someone's going to say volunteer. So it shows you how even within an organisation that was sort of wedded to it, one of its very sort of public, I suppose, systems of command and all the rest of it, did that. So I want to talk just briefly about the prison experience. And probably many are well aware of one degree or another of the blanket protests and the brutality and sing-songs and hunger strikes and all the rest of it. And if you're not all aware about it, then you should read my memoir or Shakes or Gina McCormick's or all those ones that have come out in the last couple of years. So it was all of those things. But what the blanket protest also brought about, which is rarely focused on, was a total rupture from what was formerly the command structures within the prison. Where you've been in the cages, you had the ranks and all there, you had a particular regime imposed, and you had disciplinary measures taken. Now, once you're in a cell on your own, who's going to put any discipline on you? The OC can't get out of his cell, so they'll go and tell you to knock up the head. And I actually mentioned in one memoir about when people would be doing something and caught out, like people rapping the pipes and annoying everybody else. The most the OC could do was put them on a blackout, and a blackout meant that they weren't allowed to speak out the door. Their cellmates or the guys next door weren't supposed to speak to them, which of course didn't work. You know, people spoke to them and thought that's ridiculous. So all of a sudden, the whole sort of social structure, command structure, social relations of what Republican prisoners had in the cages was now gone. And what we had to develop over the years, or what developed sort of, I suppose, just naturally, if you put it that way, was an internal self-revolutionary discipline. You understood where you were, you understood what was happening, so you weren't going to be annoying somebody else by rapping the pipes or whatever else. And it wasn't this thing that you're afraid of the OCs going to catch you or something else. It was, you just felt it was right to do this or not do what the other was. And the other thing about that period, and I did a degree before I left jail, and I did a PhD when I got out about the prison, of course, was at that time when we had no books at all, was the most educational period of my life. And it was the most educational because what I started to do was to unlearn all the crap that was in my head. You suddenly realise, and you realise just because you're having discussions, you have nothing else, you have no books to read, you have no TV to watch, you have no radio to tune into. So you're talking to Jake out the window or Tommy McKeown up somewhere else, and you're having debates about all sorts of issues. And issues, remember, like we're 18, 19, 20 years of age, so issues like socialism, communism, racism, women, divorce, all this type of stuff. I remember this is back in the 1970s, you know, a wee bit backward then too. But you could be up talking about something, and then someone would say, hey, so 2 weeks ago you were saying such and such about, you know, South Africa or about blacks, so how are you saying this now about whatever else? And everybody was under the same sort of regime, so you sort of realise, I'm just this collection of ideas and thoughts and opinions that I've never actually sat down to formulate. I just have them. I pick them up from the church, the state, peers, family, media, whatever, and just regurgitate them. To some degree, you may think of a wee bit of reflexivity, but you'll start to see the massive contradictions between some of your positions. And that's what began then, and the whole question of why is this the case? And that extended also to the Republican movement and the Republican struggle, and the question, well, why is it? Why do we do this? And so on and so forth. So in that period, that 5 years to me, developed the most critical thing for me, which was to develop a critical consciousness. And this first part of knowledge is to say, I don't know, and then it's okay to go to somebody else and say, look, could you tell me about this? Or where would I find out knowledge about it? And that led on to really significant developments post-summer strike in terms of the education, in terms of the communal structure within the wings, and in terms of the command structures within the IRA itself. So it's a critical period on that there. The other thing I've often said about it is that it was a great leveler, the term I use, because it didn't matter who you were on the outside, how long you were sentenced to, where you were from, anything else. You're now in the H blocks, you're on the blanket protest, and see if you're there in the evening, that's brilliant. See if you're there tomorrow morning, that's even better. And that's sharing over that period of time. And yes, it was also a shared brutality and all the rest of it, but that idea that you're just the same, whereas that wasn't the case, for instance, in the cages, where you had like a double system of cleared and suspended volunteers. And again, that was sort of the time that was in it. But all of that, in some sense, only came about. And sorry, what I meant to say there about that thing about the leveler and all the rest of it, and how it led on to later. I was delighted to hear in the last session there from Fergal and Croher about John Jarrett, and about how they've organised and how there is no particular leader and how everybody was a leader and everybody was a spokesperson. That was generally what we were trying to develop. I remember weren't even trying to develop it, it was arising without our knowledge really, and we're becoming conscious of it. And it was also good to hear my heroes, Paulo Freire and Frans Fanon, referred to again, two fantastic books. And I suppose if you look back to recent times, and somebody just mentioned the pandemic, that was another time when our lives were ruptured. Ours were ruptured in terms of the jail because of a British policy, which led to what we were doing and ruptured the whole sort of internal structures. The pandemic ruptured a lot of our normal lives, whether it was work, family life, friends, where we went to socialise and all the rest of it. And we've seen that since it, a lot of people have just changed from what they previously were doing. Sometimes just didn't go back to the jobs they were doing, or the type of the job has changed, or the way we communicate has changed. And I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that you're also going to jail for a few years. Hello, it might help. You might find some supper in it, or that we need another pandemic. But I think what's really interesting is that it took that, I'm talking about both situations, to bring about a reflection upon what we were doing, how our lives looked, how we spent the days, who we communicated with. A lot of people during the whole pandemic back into the arts and all the rest of it, because it was almost a way of keeping mentally healthy. Sort of things that have been forgot about a lot of times. How you relate to people, actually go out and walk on nature, which is, again, it's great that a lot of stuff has been mentioned about nature. I love forests and walks in it. But maybe again, during the pandemic, we realised that, and yet it took a pandemic to bring that about. The transformation in the H-blocks that I referred to post-hunger strike didn't occur smoothly. They didn't occur instantly, and they didn't occur without their many detractors. The world didn't collapse. The IRA wasn't weakened as some of the detractors of the process claimed it would be. On the contrary, it was strengthened, as it could only be with that type of work. A destruction, which meant that the IRA got on with doing what the IRA had to do. The IRA didn't tell you what TV program to watch or what book to read or who needed to empty the bins or brush the wing or whatever else. It needs done, just get out and do it. And that was back to that thing about individual responsibility. As I say, it's a longer thing to go into. It took many years to evolve. But for me, what's always been important about it is that it did happen. And it happened because people thought there was a better way of doing things, a more humane way of doing things, a better way to have social relations with those, with one another on it, and to move away from hierarchies. So for me, decolonization is not simply about taking over the reins of government, the economy, changing the flag of a particular region or a new national anthem or whatever else. Important as these things are in the whole process, it's about changing the mindset, and that starts with their individual selves, making appropriate changes to facilitate the growth of the new, getting rid of the old or set to the side and all the rest of it. And how we relate to one another, and I do think this goes into even the most intimate personal relationships we have. We will reflect either a liberatory politic, which is more akin to a country that has been decolonized, rather than what is currently the situation is. So the great thing is, we don't have to wait until the end of the revolution. We can get on with it right now. So, pour me the milk.